Hope everybody is doing well on this particular day, June 19th, 2024. I know that some folks are out there celebrating Juneteenth. As a matter of fact, I went by and visited a friend of mine who has had a restaurant that has been in business at a heart of the downtown development here in Durham, North Carolina. And he is actually going to close that restaurant, the BU Cafe. But then talking to him, it looks like some other people might be moving in there as he does own the building, and they might be doing some other things as well. So it does look like it will be another spot, but I know he was closing down because of the construction and the parking and a number of other things. But it does look like he's going to turn it over to some young folks, and they may have some ideas of ways to draw in crowds and all along those lines. But he does own the building, so he will definitely see what they've got going in mind and all along those lines. So definitely that is something that a lot of people will be paying attention to. I know some people were taking today off and all along those lines because it was a Juneteenth celebration. And I was actually meeting with somebody that wants to convert some of their podcasts from video to audio. So I was meeting with her at that particular location that I was referring to. And it was definitely a packed house, partially because people wanted to be there to honor his long career in terms of the restaurant and having that restaurant for a number of years and it being kind of the heart of downtown and all along those lines. But like I said, it does look like it will be going into some other things and some other things will develop in that space. And I know some other friends of mine, they are actually in Section 8 because they were having problems with their restaurant and they decided to declare bankruptcy in order to protect themselves for a minute and all along those lines. But they are hoping that they can keep COVID going in that location and all along those lines. So it's definitely interesting what's going on in the restaurant business. It is a very hard business and it was even hard during the pandemic. And now that we are supposedly more out of the pandemic, it still remains hard and all along those lines. But definitely it was a good meeting that I had earlier today. And then yesterday was actually at NIEHS because they were actually doing a Juneteenth celebration on the 18th and all along those lines. So they were actually talking about gene research and some of the research with genes and how that all plays into our life, whether it is around gender or whether it's around race and a number of other things. So the young lady gave a great lecture, and then there were some of us community partners. And as some of you that are following this network and follow me in particular, you know that I work at the Hayti Heritage Center, and we were a community partner along with Stagville and some other businesses that were out there as well. So I got a chance to go out there, pass out some of our information, let them know what we've got going on at that particular cultural arts center and all along those lines. It was definitely a hot day. And I learned that if you're going to a federal facility, you better be prepared with your ID and to go to security checks. I totally forgot about that. I don't know what I was thinking and all along those lines, because definitely they wanted to make sure that you are who you said you are. You weren't there to cause any harm and all along those lines. And they have a wonderful facility. It's even got a lake. And one of my coworkers pointed out that they even had a veterinarian on duty that was there taking care of some of the animals that are there as well, because it is a federal research facility and all along those lines. And it's not that far from the EPA and that kind of space. So it was quite interesting to be in that space. And it was definitely hot yesterday. It's been a little hot on today as well, but I did have a good meal at that particular restaurant that I was talking about earlier that I was going to because it was closing down. And actually, the Hayti was doing picture day because we also have at that particular facility a youth arts intensive. It lasts for 2 weeks and they started on Monday. So they're in the midway point. As a matter of fact, they are about to end in about 5:30 or so of the third day of a 2-week session, and then it will close out with a performance on June 30th, which ironically I think is the day before my birthday of July 1st, when I'll turn the big 6'2" and all along those lines. So it's definitely going to be interesting and all in that space. And then had the pleasure on Monday of talking to some diplomats. So some diplomats that are in the human rights space came, and they were from places like Belarus and even places like the Asian countries and a number of other countries as well. And this will be the second, or was the second, diplomatic trip that it comes. The first one was dealing more with music and entertainment, as a lot of those were from the hip hop space and all along those lines. But I've got two amazing guests today, so I'm gonna find out how they're coping with the heat. Maybe it's not as hot where they are and everything. So I've got one that's in the field of the arts, and I've got another one that's in the field of business and health and wellness. Matter of fact, I probably need to do better in health and wellness and all in that space, because I know that sometimes when I get out and about, I am too busy eating junk food. And we all know that during the pandemic, a lot of us became too good of friends with that whole notion of DoorDash and Grubhub and all along those lines. I know that I have definitely ordered more than my share over the last several years, and have probably put on a little bit more pounds than I need to, and all along those lines. So definitely looking forward to hearing what Micah's got to say, because it seems that Micah was in the space of business development, and some of that was in the health and wellness space. I'm going to bring up Mike, and I've also got, like I said, the gentleman that's in the arts world, which is Jeff, as also. But I'll bring up Micah first, and I'll bring up Jeff. But we're going to learn a little bit about both of these individuals and see how life is treating them and all in that space. So, Micah, how are you doing? I forgot exactly where you are. Like I said, I'm in Durham, North Carolina, and it's been in the 90s. So definitely, I am not a big fan, even though I'm a jive baby of hot weather. Even though I've done festivals in hot weather, it still doesn't mean that I have to like it when it is sweltering and all along those lines. So how is life treating you?
Doing well. I'm up here in Boston, Massachusetts, and it is 93, and it feels like 103 here, according to the Weather Channel. So it is not that much different in terms of heat as it is in Durham, North Carolina, probably today.
Yeah,
it's hot. I'm jealous. My wife and my son are at a pool party right now, and I'm sitting here in the AC talking to you.
Well, the pool party sounds like that might have been the move to go. And after we're done, you can probably head to that pool party and all along those lines. I know that I met you through podcast guests and other things along those lines. So I know that you are fortunate and to be a award-winning person in terms of like having founded some multiple award-winning companies. And like I said, I was glad to see that my friend Dorian has got plans for the restaurant that he opened and everything, because it was I was talking, because of course anytime that a restaurant closes, people come on that last closing day and everything. So it was definitely a nice little crowd, and ran across some friends, and one of the friends was reminding me that we just did the US Open in Pinehurst, and the original location of the BU was the location of the bagel dog. And the bagel dog literally is what it just sounds like. It was hot dogs that were served in a bagel. And Chris, that opened that restaurant, had the privilege of serving food at the U.S. Open at one of the other times that they were here, because the U.S. Open just recently left Pinehurst, which is also here in North Carolina, and all along those lines. So what have you found to be the key to success in terms of being a business coach? And I know that, like I've said before, one of the hardest businesses to do is a restaurant, or anything that's got to do with the bar environment. But like I said, Dorian came here. He's a Duke graduate, and he's already got some ideas, because he did some expansion before he closed the flagship restaurant, which is what this one was, and everything. So some of those other restaurants he's already promised will stay open, including the one I think that's in the airport, and a couple that are on the Duke campus and everything. And like I said, he's got some plans for the existing one, as he was smart enough to buy the building, which not everybody does. So what advice would you give to folks in the business lane, particularly in that hard-hitting business of restaurants?
Yeah, the restaurant industry is notoriously tough. As a business coach, I've seen a lot of different. I have coached hundreds of business hours, and across about a half a dozen industries, and I have been fortunate enough to be able to see a lot of the mistakes that are common with small business. And, I developed a theory that business owners make stupid mistakes. Now, that sounds very simplistic, stupid mistakes, but really it's an acronym. It's not an insult to business owners, because there are some very smart business owners who run businesses that could be wildly successful, except for what I call stupid mistakes. So the acronym STUPID stands for slow to implement, too complicated, unaware of numbers, poor planning, ignoring feedback, and distracted focus. Those are typically the cluster of mistakes that I see that business owners make when it comes to running a business. The thing that makes a restaurant, in my opinion, so hard to operate is that restaurants operate on notoriously thin margins already. And what complicates the fact that they run on their thin margins is that they also have to not perfectly, but they have to very accurately assess their inventory needs. They have to understand what their demand is. They have to understand what their customer likes. They have to continue to turn over their menus so that people come back if they don't specialize in something specific, like your friend did. It can be very hard to operate a restaurant today because there are just so many options for eating. And if you're a very successful business operator that, for instance, has your business located in California, then you have regulations to deal with on top of how hard it is, no matter where you are, to operate your business. And that is something that I think all restaurateurs have to deal with. Plus, there's also notoriously high turnover at all staffing positions in restaurants. Mm-hmm. So you're battling razor thin margins because restaurants operate on volume. You have inventory challenges where you have to get the inventory pretty precise and accurate. You have the ever-changing needs, wants, and desires of the consumer. And then you have a very high turnover of staff, the industry. They have a hard time keeping their staff. So that could be a recipe for a disaster. And if you marry that with business owners who are new, who make stupid mistakes, that cluster of mistakes that I was talking about earlier, it can be a whoa Nelly moment, for business owners who are trying to operate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I know the other thing, there was actually an article with one of our local networks is actually done both in their print version as well as their TV version. But apparently, like here in Durham, there have been literally 82 downtown Durham businesses that closed during the pandemic. And part of that, and I'm sure that even Jeff will have some thoughts about this because he's in the entertainment space, is in the rise of remote work. So a lot of people are doing their work. Because I know one of the other companies I work for is Measurement Inc., which is a testing company to do a lot of the end of the year tests, Common Core kind of testing. And there was a time that we used to go to their physical building, and those physical buildings still exist. But now the majority of our work is done from our homes and all along those lines. And I know the other issues that they've been dealing with has been the high costs of parking for employees, and of course problems with development construction, because sometimes you can be in a burgeoning area because we have some new skyscrapers that are coming up, and that can be problematic for the restaurants as well, because it can hurt the bottom line, because sometimes while you are hoping that they're going to bring in tremendous business and tremendous people in with these new skyscrapers and everything, you've also got to deal with the problem of dealing with road closures and construction and things along those lines. As a matter of fact, Dorian, the friend that I was talking about in this particular article, he was saying that you can walk downtown during the day midweek and it's a ghost town. And I do agree with him, because there is a lack of weekday foot traffic in downtown Durham, which has created what owners are calling a dire situation. And even Dorian brought up the idea of remote work. And I know that even in the entertainment world, there's been remote work as well. So I was just wondering some of your thoughts around that, just from a business coaching standpoint, because I don't know that all the cities, it's not just in Durham, I've seen it probably in like Atlanta and New York, and I'm sure you've even seen it in Boston, where they are glad to get the growth and the development, but sometimes the planning people maybe not thinking far enough in advance in terms of how they are planning out what they want to do and everything. So I just wanted your thoughts around that.
Yeah, there's about almost just under 4 years ago, about 3.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I made a prediction on my podcast, which was that a lot of the commercial office spaces and with commercial tenants in those spaces were going to have a hard time surviving, and because of the increase in remote work. I mean, it's not just the private sector that has gone remote. There's a lot of public sector offices that prior to the pandemic were never remote that are also remote now as well. They cut down on their physical in-office staff, and that's decimated a lot of businesses that were located in areas that relied on lunchtime traffic, like panini shops and coffee shops, and things like this that would serve that office population before work, mid-morning, and then at lunch, and then typically, close around like 2:30, something like that. And yeah, a lot of those businesses have gone under. One of the predictions I made was not just that commercial space would be kind of turned upside down, commercial real estate, but also that a lot of them would be converted to apartments. And we're starting to see a lot of city planning boards and planning projects around converting these commercial office spaces into full-on apartments, because The U.S. has a housing shortage anyway, so it makes sense that the building is there. But when you convert these commercial office spaces that were zoned for businesses at a certain square footage, and then there's debt attached to the acquisition of the building based off of the square footage, pricing for rent for commercial space and for residential space is priced in two different ways. So they can still make it work, but it'd be interesting to see how they do it. I think that if they focus on converting these spaces into housing, apartments, condos, some kind of hopefully market rate housing that will drive the price down of rent in a lot of these big cities where rent is absolutely insane. And the effect of that hopefully will be to bring back some businesses that need the bodies downtown, because if you don't have businesses downtown, if you don't have office spaces downtown, and you create a void, what that leaves is areas for crime and other stuff to develop in that void, because there's not a thriving operating metropolis like there should be. So
Hey, Mike, but the other issue that happens with that, sometimes I wonder, and I don't know your thoughts around this, is that because I have seen, and we were actually talking about this on our news show earlier today, where some of the quote unquote project areas, like we have those here in Durham. I know that they were some that are there, like in Compton and New York and everything. They are gentrified out. So a lot of people will get those houses that you're talking about, and then the people are priced out and all along those lines. Because I have seen even here, and our rents are not nearly as bad as say New York or California, but they are bad for some of the people that are trying to pay for them, because I think the rule is that you're not supposed to spend more than 25% on your living. And I do know that even here we've seen rates go up even during the pandemic and everything. So I just wanted your thoughts around that, because it seems to me that that's another planning mistake that is being made and everything, is that they want people downtown. Because I can even tell you that even here in Durham, there are some apartment complexes that have been built that are nowhere near filled, because they are kind of priced out of the people are priced out of what they can afford and everything, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that they trying to make a trade-off in a lot of these big cities. Instead of providing the actual housing, they provide the voucher system for people who would normally have the housing. So before it was like, well, okay, well, this project building or this low-income housing building is in the area where they don't necessarily need the voucher system because they have the government housing. Therefore, they can just, everything on that property is subsidized. But now when they take that property and they flip it to, a college that wants to buy it as a dorm for their students, they then convert that entire population to voucher members, and then they have to go find places. Well, in Massachusetts, it's illegal not to accept somebody with a voucher, regardless of kind of where you live. But, I believe that they thought that was a trade-off for like providing this prime area for tenants that, have more money. But I don't see it playing out. I see a lot more people kind of ending up moving out of state, moving with family, living in shelters. Unfortunately, I think that's part of the reason why shelters have become a lot more overcrowded. And builders cannot build affordable housing or anything fast enough. Really, in order to flood the market with rental units, it takes a long time to do that. That's one method that one could say would drive down the price of housing from an economic standpoint, which is just you oversupply. If you create an oversupply, you drive down the demand, and that decreased demand would drive down the price of rent. But they can't. They are about a decade at least, maybe 15 years away from building anything approximating sufficient enough housing for most of the people. Right. So that's how far away they are. So I'm not sure how. I had someone on my podcast, Mark, that was trying to tackle this problem. His goal was to try to build, between 300 to 500 units a year, to try to increase the supply of housing on the market. That's just one person. I mean, it's a fascinating altruistic goal. I mean, is it attainable? Is one contracting company or one building company that are not building modular homes in a factory going to be able to turn around, acquire a building, acquire enough land, produce housing in substantive enough supply that is going to affect a national market? Probably not, right? Like it's gonna take a lot more will and a lot more a lot more focus in the real estate sector to do that. Unfortunately, I don't see the supply of affordable housing increasing faster than the supply of market rate housing anytime soon.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. And a lot of the market rate housing is owned by other people, because I know even here there are a number of apartment complexes that the actual managers aren't even here. They're in other states and other places along those lines. Before I bring in Jeff and learn about his entertainment career and all along those lines, and of course there are some parallels between both the housing and the entertainment careers that I'm curious about as well. But one couple of things with you and everything. What do you think is some of the big mistakes that folks make in terms of business and business development and all along those lines? And if you could tell us a little bit about this BOP method, because I did see that. And of course, I want to learn more about your podcast as well, but not just restaurants, but in general, what do you think are some of the mistakes that business owners make? And maybe it's just a common thing, like not having an actual plan, but as you are a business coach, what are some of the ones that even to this day surprise you?
Yeah, the cluster of mistakes I mentioned earlier, most small business owners are notoriously slow to implement, mainly for two reasons, I think. Because they have very little time to implement because they're working in their business, not on their business. And the second reason why they don't implement is because they get, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. That's an aphorism that has been around for a long time. But, we get used to operating in a certain way. We think that we know as business owners exactly what we need to do, and without relying on the expertise of others. But that's what I've seen. I've seen business owners overcomplicate things in their business that should be simpler. For instance, I had a business client who had a terrible way for customers to pay. It took the customer about 3 or 4 steps to try to complete a payment for their service. And, I have a saying, which is that if you make doing business with you easy, people will do business with you every time. And so I think that sometimes business owners overcomplicate the delivery of their service or how they present their product. I think that almost every business owner that I have met in my business coaching company have not been aware of their numbers, their KPIs, metrics, key performance indicators. They don't have to be complicated metrics, but they just have to be framed out enough so that you understand what it is your business is bringing in, how much it costs you to operate your business, how much it costs you to acquire one customer, how long they stay, how much they pay. Those are very basic metrics, but those metrics are, if sales are the lifeblood of the business, then those metrics are the oxygen that help you to continue to thrive. And then, of course, the P is poor planning. I do see a lot of poor planning with business owners. They typically plan for revenue cycles as opposed to, and they plan in very short categories of their business. So, for instance, they don't plan for marketing for the next quarter or the next year. They typically plan around how much money they have coming in. It's a very cyclical thought. It's a very acute cyclical thought process that they have. And what I would like to see is business owners taking planning more seriously, having an annual goal planning session and then breaking that into quarters. Planning, for instance, for how many customers that they need to bring in, how much they plan to actually spend within the next month or the next quarter, to see what their marketing plan is and how they're going to deploy that to get the customers that help drive the revenue numbers. And then, of course, ignoring feedback would be the I in stupid. And ignoring feedback basically is, customers always give you feedback. They always do. They do it both implicitly and complicitly, right? They're very explicit about how they want to do business with you. And they might not write a Google review, or they might not put a note in the suggestion box, but what they will do is in your interaction with them, they will often let you know how they feel about the experience that they had. And without a way to create a feedback loop so that you can take that feedback, internalize it into the business, and then improve upon it, and then turn that into a roadmap to improve in the future, and to tie that into the poor planning part of stupid, into those goals, you're not going to be able to make changes faster than you're going to be detracting from the success of your business. And then the last thing is distracted focus. I see so many business owners, the reason why they don't succeed is because they get caught up in what Bedros Keuilian calls the idea theory, or what, I call just people being scatterbrained, which is that business owners by nature love ideas. That's who we are. We love the fact that we can create an idea that we can implement, that people will love, enjoy, and tell people about. It is a form of artistry through business. And so oftentimes business owners get so distracted with ideas and creating ideas. There's so many dead projects that they decided that they wanted to try to implement, but they never did because they could never plan for it. They never operationalize the ideas. They never implement them because they're too focused on things that don't actually move the needle from point A to point B. And to their credit, the reason why entrepreneurs often have contributed greatly to society is because we think about point I, J, K, L, and M.
Right.
But in order to get people to buy in, you need to think about all the steps between A and L, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, right? Like all those other things matter to moving a business forward. And I see business owners with a lot of distraction, and they do it to themselves. I mean, they probably have on average 3 to 5 different projects, ideas, or things that they want to implement that have nothing to do with their core business. And that distracted focus is a killer.
Yeah, but in addition to that killing and everything, I have seen, actually I hate to say it, but I did see it earlier today, and part of it was the last day of that particular restaurant and everything in terms of their current model. But I do sometimes think that restaurant owners and just business owners in general can sometimes maybe give people too strong of a lean and let them do maybe too much. Because I did see, like even at the restaurant today, the lady was taking orders, cleaning the desk, and also being the hostess and everything. So I have something sometimes where there is a little bit too much leeway. That's the word I was looking for. Leeway given to their employees. But I've also seen the opposite, where sometimes the bosses and the entrepreneurs like to be what is the one we hear more in control, macro manager. So sometimes I think that there is two opposite ends, but some can be overly micro and some can be overly macro, and both of those can be deadly to a business and everything along those lines. But I've definitely seen both of those situations where you're sitting there going like, that person shouldn't be doing all of those jobs. And then I've also seen some where the boss isn't necessarily hearing the voice of their employees and giving them enough responsibility. So I've seen both sides of that.
Yeah, that goes into the poor planning, the slow implementation, and the ignoring feedback buckets of the stupid mistakes that business owners make. I mean, poor planning is not knowing how many employees you need to accomplish a task that will help your business run efficiently. Right. Slow implementation is the fact that you need policies for your employees to actually to follow, so that they can do the job every time, have some ownership, and repeat the same job that they did the previous day. Without strategic implementation of employee policies, and without planning how your employees are going to work, then you end up in that chaotic mess that you're talking about, which is, look, I need to make a hire. So what am I going to do? And I'm a restaurant. I'm going to hire a chef. I'm going to have my chef design the menu. I'm going to have that person be the sous chef. I'm going to have that person be the marketer. All that stuff. That doesn't work. You don't hire. You hire for the highest necessity of that you need in your business first order principles, and then you go from there, right? It's like, what, you're a restaurant, well, you need a chef, right? So like, get a chef, and then you need, that after you need a chef, you need to market your company, because you want people to actually knock on the door and sit in the restaurant. So what do you need after you need a chef? Okay, well, you need someone to cook the food, and you need someone to bring in people, and then you can build out the framework of what your business is, after that, and then the third thing is, like, you want to control your OpEx, your operations expenditure. So like, you want to make sure that you're not just taking money and throwing it out the window. So what do? You plan to have to implement an inventory management system, so that everything gets sold, everything gets tracked, it reduces by one, and then you have to buy one, right? You know exactly what you need, so that you don't actually waste money.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that in some restaurants and in some businesses, and that's where I'm gonna bring in Jeff as well. They sometimes want the entertainment also, and I know that even at a couple of the restaurants that I've known, they have had tremendous success with bringing in a band or bringing in entertainment, but sometimes it is a lot of people that are sitting there and listening to the music, but they aren't doing what you sometimes think that they will do when you bring in entertainment, which is also spend. And that sometimes we'll call a restaurant to give up on that aspect. Because I've seen a couple of restaurants that were music venues as well, but if the music venue people if you're spending for the band and the people that are coming in aren't spending enough in terms of buying food and buying drinks, then there are times that you decide to get out of that business. Because even the one that I'm talking about, when they think this is their 14th year, is how many they made it to. But in their early days, they were definitely a music venue. But I think Joanne and others realized that they were losing money because people were coming in, but weren't necessarily spending money as well. So he got out of that music space. And some people, including some of the fans, said that was one of the reasons that they stopped coming, because that was something that drew them in and all along those lines. But like I said, sometimes people like a certain quality, like entertainment, but they also don't realize, or maybe they do realize it, and they just choose to ignore it. That part of the reason of having that is that the restaurateur or the owner is hoping that you're going to spend some money on some of the goods that they have and not just be there to listen to the music and buy like a soda. They want you to actually spend some money so they can afford to pay the band and the other people that they might be bringing in as well. Yeah. But yeah, we got Jeff with us as well, and I know that, and I definitely want to hear more about your podcast, Micah. But Jeff, you are in the space of doing some filmmaking, and I understand that you've had some success on some films that I even remember, because I do remember briefly, even though I can't remember the whole nature of My Dinner with Andre, and definitely I remember My Life as a Dog and everything. And I see that you've done some tremendous work and you're back in the filmmaking career. And I'm thinking that even with what we had going on with the writer's strike, there were some people that were concerned about what me and Michael were just talking about, which is how remote work and even some of that can impact the entertainment space. But I know that even independent filmmakers were finding ways to still stay engaged, even when we were at the height of the pandemic. So if you want to tell us a little bit more about what you've got going on, and also this Goldilocks and the Two Bears, because I'm thinking that it's like the old traditional Goldilocks, but it might have a twist as well. So I definitely want to hear more about what you've got going on as well.
Yeah, that film is it's decidedly not a fairy tale, but we can move back to that in a minute. First of all, I want to compliment Micah on his great lighting, and I'm envious of it. I don't know how. I'm a filmmaker and I've got the worst lighting going on behind me, so I apologize for that. Thanks. I mean, just in brief, I'm what they call an independent filmmaker, and I was, and I have been, still am to a certain extent, an independent film distributor. I've been distributing independent and foreign language films for over 50 years. And just to clarify, I did not make My Dinner with Andre or My Life as a Dog. I was fortunate enough to represent them as a distributor. My Life as a Dog was directed by a great Swedish director named Lasse Hallström, and My Dinner with Andre by a great French director, although it was an American film, and that was Louis Malle. And my career got going 50 years ago, more than 50 years. Actually, 50 years ago this November is when I began my distribution career. And I've been an independent filmmaker. I've just finished my 8th feature film. And I'll never take for granted the opportunities I've had to do that. It was a dream I had when I was 10 years old, literally. I didn't think it would take until I was 41 to make my first film. It is the most expensive art form ever created by man, which complicates things. It makes it more challenging. Challenges are kind of and how we deal with those challenges and how they can spiral out of control is kind of what my new film, Goldilocks and the Two Bears, is about. It's a film that begins as a home invasion in reverse, where 3 very disparate young people find themselves together by sheer happenstance, and how their relationship evolves over the course of a week. And just to go on record, I'm in Las Vegas. I moved to Las Vegas from New York in 2018, largely because of the unaffordability of living in New York, and it's been my home since then. It's, by the way, a balmy 94 degrees right now, so that closes the chapter on the meteorology part of this program. But it's summer, so I don't understand why we're all so surprised and shocked by a little warmth or a little humidity or whatever. Although we're in the desert, so we have dry heat.
Yeah, y'all have the dry heat. I cannot get away with that dry heat, but yes, it is the humidity that is torturesome here in the South, and particularly in Durham. But something you just said kind of plays to what I was talking to Mike about, and some people would, because I do have some friends that are filmmakers and quite a few that are independent filmmakers, and they would agree with you that it is one of the most expensive and difficult careers, particularly in the arts, to go into and everything. So some people would ask themselves, because you said you had this notion of wanting to be a filmmaker way back when you were 10 years old and everything, but why would you even go into that field? Because some people are always wanting to go into that which is the easiest and that which is the easiest to accomplish. I sometimes think that that is short-sighted and everything, but I'm sure that even during the time that you became a filmmaker, probably a number of your friends and even probably even family members at that time, because one of the things that I talk about often on this show is that imposter syndrome, and I'm sure a number of people, even your own inner critic, were sitting there going like, there's no way I'm going to make this first film, and there's no way that I need to be a filmmaker. Because you even talked about that gap that existed between your dream as a 10-year-old and that first film that you made. And did you realize that it was going to be as expensive? Because like I said, I do have some friends that are filmmakers, and it is not a cheap art form.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to your question is that between the time it became a childhood passion or dream and the time I began making films, I just, by sheer dumb luck, became a film distributor. And nobody in the history of mankind has ever asked a young boy or a young girl, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they said, I want to be a film distributor. Nobody's ever said that. We all wanted to make films or act in films or shoot film. And one was a means to an end. The problem is film distributors get paid way too well. So we all got into it, and those who were talented enough to survive bought into the American dream. And instead of following their passion, they cobbled together a little money, and they found a partner, a husband or a wife, and they married or they had children, and they buy the house and they've got a mortgage, and then there's college education for the children. And that initial passion and drive kind of gets lost, abandoned. And it might have happened to me too, but I was married for a short time, and that led to the writing of one of my own films, in fact. But I have no children, and so I had no responsibilities to anybody but myself. And because I was successful as a film distributor, I began my career working for a man who was often considered the godfather of American independent film, and that's John Cassavetes. He was my mentor. He was my idol from the time I was 16. And the first film I distributed was his movie A Woman Under the Influence, which was ragingly successful. And I kind of think it was almost like, now that I'm living in Las Vegas, gambling, which is that if my first experience as an independent distributor had tanked, I might never have distributed another film. Just as the first time you sit at a slot machine or a craps table, if you win money that first time, you could lose your next 10 visits and you'll still go back. But if you lost that first time, you'll never go gambling again. So, and this is gambling. The entertainment industry is a big gamble. And so what I did, because I had no responsibilities to anybody but myself, was I was able to save up a whole bunch of money. I was able to save up a few $100,000, and I was writing screenplays all along the route of distribution. And when I finally wrote one that I thought would make a great movie, and found myself out on the street, as it were, between jobs, between distribution posts, I said, you know what? I can make this movie, and I don't have to ask anybody for permission. And it's all my money. I'm going to break open the piggy bank. I believe in myself. I'm going to gamble on myself. And I did it, and that was in '95. And it was not financially successful, but it was critically successful. It was debuted at a number of high-end film festivals. I worked with some great actors and craftspeople, and it was almost everything I had hoped for decades. But it didn't make its money back, so I went back to distribution, saved up, cobbled together shoved a lot of more money into my piggy bank, and it was a gap of about 8 years between my first and second film. But the second film was called Flannel Pajamas. It was with two actors who were then relatively unknown, but are very well known now. Justin Kirk, who went on to be on Weeds for 8 seasons and had just finished co-starring in Mike Nichols' Angels in America. And Julianne Nicholson, who just won an Emmy Award for Mayor of Easttown, HBO series, and was in I, Tonya. My film was in the Sundance Film Festival in dramatic competition. And the next 2 films I didn't have to finance with my life savings. And here we are later, I guess 41 to now, I guess 40 years later, 45 years later, and 25 years later as a filmmaker. And I'm still making films. And I think each one gets better and better with practice, with experience. The one thing that's been consistent with all of my films is that I have been blessed to direct some of the greatest actors you'll ever see in a movie, even if they're unknown to people. They have been remarkable. And my films are like John Cassavetes' films. They're character-driven, they're dialogue-driven, and that's what attracts great actors to the material. And
just
even though I don't...
Just out of curiosity, because I do know the names of some of the films, but what is Flannel Pajamas about, and what is Mad Women and the Last about? Because I do know that was some of the films, and some people might even be going like, I'm not a mad woman, but then again, maybe there are some mad women out there and everything. So what were those films specifically about?
Well, Flannel Pajamas was probably my easiest film for audiences to digest, and it was my most autobiographical film to date, which is boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl. That was the story. And the 2 lead characters are in 100% of the film. They're in every single scene. But there were 41 other speaking roles in the movie, and there are 41 other people in most of our lives. So we have to get a full 3-dimensional picture of the people that are driving this thing home. And so, again, it was plot-wise, it was a very conventional plot. Not so much the films that followed. You mentioned Mad Women. That was about, 2 women, a mother and a daughter. The mother has committed a crime of conscience. She's in jail for about 9 months, and when she comes out, she decides to go back to her small town and run for mayor, and becomes an activist. But meanwhile, her husband has also committed a crime, and he's in prison when she gets out of prison. She had 3 daughters, but one of them is now a doctor and is serving in Doctors Without Borders over in Europe. One child died of cancer as a baby, and so that only leaves her with 1 child in her life. So for the course of the movie, it's mostly the 2 women. And at one point, because the mother has lost her whole family except for her 1 remaining daughter, at one point she is struck by an uncontrollable impulse. And the aspect of the film that freaked a lot of people out is that what occurs for a brief time in the movie is an adult, mutually agreeable, incestuous relationship between mother and daughter. And it both changes their relationship, even after the sexual aspect of their relationship ends. It changes their relationship as mother and daughter forever, and helps the daughter find her own trajectory in life for the first time. And that's why the metaphorical title Mad Women exists. My film Molly's Theory of Relativity was about a young woman who's an astrophysicist and is the breadwinner in her small family, and for the first time in her life loses her job, her passion, her dream, and has to decide where her life is going. And it all takes place on Halloween, the scariest day of the year. And she's experiencing the scariest day of her life. It takes place in 18 hours over the course of that day. And even though she lives in one apartment with only her husband, 7 other characters show up at the house, some of whom are deceased, and some of whom are well alive. So that's another one. And again, the one that's about to open, we don't have any dates yet set in Boston or North Carolina, but we will. It's the first movie ever filmed, first theatrical movie ever filmed entirely in Las Vegas in history. I fully accept all challenges to tell me that's not true, but we believe it is. We've been challenged by a lot of people so far, and we proved them wrong. It was really moving here. When I moved here, I didn't think I was going to spend the rest of my life here. I'm still not sure. I love it here. But the first year I was here, I was busy opening my last movie, the one you mentioned, The Last, which is a contemporary Holocaust-themed film that takes place in New York. I was busy opening that around the country in 2019, so I spent very little time in Las Vegas. And of course, in 2020, the world ended. So for 2 years, I was largely a homebody, but I was right. It inspired me. The silent suburb of Las Vegas, where I live, and the rather unusual people I would come across on the rare occasions that I would venture outside during the worst time of the pandemic. That's what inspired the writing of Goldilocks and the Two Bears. And you mentioned earlier in your introduction the fact that we're all talking to each other virtually right now.
Right.
A lot of people work virtually, and a lot of people, as a consequence of the pandemic, became addicted to streaming entertainment. We have to get off our asses and out of our homes and learn how to be a functioning society again, and learn how to interact with other human beings. And I think that the desire, the appetite for that we're seeing it more and more all the time. I would like it to be a revolution instead of an evolution, but I think that it's not streaming of entertainment that is causing people to be couch potatoes. I don't think that's it at all. I think when it comes to the entertainment industry and specifically my sector of the independent of the film industry, I think it was the writers and writers and actor strikes that you spoke of earlier. We were coming back. We were coming out of our homes. We were coming back to movies. Just last year, the movie business was thriving. And in fact, the independent sector was in profit. But I think, there are 2 more craft unions that are threatening to strike in the next several months. And if that happens, it's going to devastate the industry again. So I am pro-union, but there's a time and a place. And, we can't eat our own. So.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. You actually brought up something, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about what I'm going to bring up. But one of the things that I do in the various versions of the careers that I have is I do some event planning, and I do some things around some of the festivals here in North Carolina. And I have seen that there are starting to be an increase in attendance, and people are starting to come out. I am still seeing, because actually I saw one of them earlier today, some folks that are still masked up, even though they are the rarity and not the norm from what I'm seeing. Because even at most of the festivals, and even our minor league baseball team is doing quite well, that you will see a spattering of people that are still wearing their mask, and some of those are people that are dealing with those kind of like health issues that cause them to still be kind of susceptible and all along those lines. So I get that if you are part of one of those age groups or one of those kind of folks that have got those kind of things that are part of your medical history that might cause you to want to still be masked up. But even when I've gone to restaurants, a lot of them are not, and everything, at least not here in North Carolina. I do sometimes think, and you may agree with me, Jeff, that sometimes, and maybe even Micah, that when there are newer festivals and everything, that sometimes it becomes a kind of too many people doing the same thing. Because even today is Juneteenth, and there have been a number of Juneteenth celebrations going on, and I did find that on some cases it was like a multitude of them, and it's like coming back to your point, Micah, because I sometimes don't think the planners talk to each other, because I'm going like, y'all are having 5 separate Juneteenths on the same day, so that's going to kind of divide your market. So in versus kind of like planning it out, and maybe one of you does it one day and the other does it another day. But I do sometimes wish that our people that are doing the planning would do more conversation and not just kind of like do it willy-nilly, because I do sometimes find that the planning can be willy-nilly. But I just wanted your take on that, Micah, because today is the Juneteenth, and like I said, I know that on Saturday, when my friend Phyllis that runs this, well, actually it's her son that now does it, runs the Spectacular magazine version of Juneteenth. I think there was one in Bragtown. I think there was one in another community. There was some in like some of our other cities nearby, like Wake Forest and everything. And when I looked at the audiences, I'm going like, well, there's a reason that y'all all have sparse audiences. Y'all have kind of defeated the purpose by all doing them on the same day and everything. But I just wanted your take on that.
Yeah, it's always tough, because I think probably in any industry, whether it's entertainment or whatever, it's hard to centralize, activities surrounding something where people all feel independently a part of, a contributory to whatever the event that they're celebrating is or commemorating. And it's a tough lift to probably get individuals to not want to express themselves in their own individual way. So centralizing celebrations or organizing certain activities for maybe for like a larger conglomerate that has reach over a demographic is one thing, and often they can pull in bigger crowds. But when people feel personally connected, you kind of get this splinter effect of people doing kind of what they want to do. And chasing whatever the day means to them, and in my opinion, I think as a business, from a business perspective, if your company is going to, some companies choose to be involved in every holiday event or celebration, the commemoration. Some companies choose the opposite and don't get involved. Obviously you have to choose, I guess, one or the other reaction to it, but I think it's hard, with national type events to get people to all focus on one specific thing. You can't even get a town to agree on anything, never mind a celebration or a commemoration about something. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
This might be a little off of what is the specificity of your question, but is it really that much different from New Year's Eve, where groups of people start at one celebration and then go to the next and the next and the next? I mean, why not cover a wide swath of the reason that you're celebrating any event or occasion or holiday? Why limit yourself to just an appetizer, one appetizer? Get a taste of all.
Yeah, well, part of that is the notion of access and getting to point A and B, because I think the thing with New Year's Eve, at least this is my philosophy, I think people are almost expected to go to multiple New Year's Eve celebrations, because it's kind of the way that the holiday has been created. So I don't know many people that don't. They may end up at a primary one, whether that's in Raleigh, which is our state capital, first night, or like a watch service if they're more church oriented or something like that. But a lot of people go to multiple celebrations. I find that New Year's Eve and to some degree Halloween are multiple destination kind of celebrations, where some of these other ones are newer and not as planned out to be multiple destinations. But I do agree that they probably could do a better job of being multiple destinations and all along those lines. I did have a question for both of you, because you're both from areas that are now living in areas that have certain perceived histories. Because a lot of times when I think of people that I think of Boston, and by the way, congratulations, y'all just won a championship. I wasn't rooting for you and all along those lines and everything, because I did go to school with Doc Rivers, who is now the coach of the Bucks, and I have historically have rooted for. There are certain teams that I root for that are teams that I have always rooted for. Like I'm a diehard Vikings fan. Of course, I root for my Durham Bulls, but there are other sports like basketball that I root for my fellow Marquette alumni wherever they may be going. So I'm like rooting for Jimmy Butler, I'm rooting for Dwayne Wade, and of course I root for Doc Rivers wherever he's been. So of course I'm rooting for the Bucks now that he's in Milwaukee. But Boston did do a great job, and y'all handled that Dallas team quite handily, except for that one blowout loss. But other than that, y'all handled them the whole series and all on those lines. But Boston has a certain stereotypes that exist. Even some people that are familiar with the South will say that Boston has some equal kind of negativity in some of their relationships in terms of ethnicities and everything in that space. But I just wondering, what are some of the things that surprised you about Boston, other than y'all's great franchises that you were not expecting? I don't know how long you've lived in Boston, but what are some of the things that surprised you about Boston? And then I'm going to ask Jeff the same thing about Las Vegas, but what are some of the things that surprised you about Boston?
Well, look, I was born and raised in Boston. I lived my whole life here. Yeah, I mean, like historically, or for a part of history, Boston has had, there were issues, obviously the most notorious of which were the busing issues that they've had up here that, gained national attention. But frankly, it's been my experience personally that, Boston has been a great place for me to grow and thrive as an entrepreneur and raise my family. I think I never really, I'm heterodox in terms of views in general. So I don't really lean one way or the other, but like, in terms of like me personally kind of growing up here, what's so funny is I used to work at a very old health club, like many years ago. And there were very, very rich white people there. It was a very wealthy club. And I grew the most as a person and a professional in that club. And what I found was the generosity and the generosity of intellectual conversation and even resources when I wanted to do things was readily abounded with the people that were there, probably unlike people might think. And I tend to, I'm not really naturally, this is a truth. I'm kind of answering this way because of the question, but I'm not naturally a person who tunes into racial issues in that regard. I maybe it's my naivete, but I just, I kind of do a lot of focus on the realities and kind of what I see, and I kind of take what people see, and I don't, because a person's a jerk to me, I don't ascribe to them malevolence of any type of thought, because maybe that person's just a jerk. Maybe they don't like me. That's okay. You cannot like me. Maybe I don't like you. It's possible. And there's nothing else there but a genuine dislike for another person who you believe has a different viewpoint than you. I think that what I've experienced more in Boston, probably if I were to try to crystallize it in a way that makes sense, is more, you should think this way because this is how people with your skin think. And that to me is offensive because I believe personally that we are individuals who have the ability to conceptualize, reason, and understand the world how we see it. And we have the ability to develop our own unique ideas, maybe some not unique because this is 2024. So there's a lot of ideas that we feel like are unique, but that have been just repackaged over the years. Yeah, so I think if anything, what I would say that the experience I have is I noticed that because I'm not naturally a person who focuses on, and in my family growing up, we never really focused on racial issues. We just focused on being good people and good citizens. And I don't naturally default to that. But I have seen people, I have heard directly, I would say. And that's not to say that I haven't suspected a person has treated me differently because of the color of my skin. But that's not my first thought. Maybe it's a tertiary thought. Maybe it's a fourth or fifth thought. Maybe, if I think about it at all. I tend to take people based off of what they present to me. But I have seen people just say, well, you don't think like all these other people over here that believe this one thing, but you should be thinking this way. And so to me, that has been fundamentally, that has made me free and happy, and has allowed me to transform above the conversation. I can talk to anyone. I can relate to anyone. I have the ability. I've had a unique career. I've had the ability. I'm on this podcast talking to two awesome dudes, and that is a direct result of my ability to just function, and to be able to relate to people generally. And I try not to ascribe too much negativity to people. It's just not. I feel like life is very complex, and it's not always what it appears to be initially. So yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Before I get to Jeff, I did have one question just really quickly. You might go, because you mentioned you were, at least for a minute, in the health field and everything. And what do you think? What is your views of the current health field? Because like I said, I will freely admit that I have put on a few pounds during this pandemic from ordering way too much of DoorDash and going to too many restaurants and everything, and not doing enough of what Jeff just said, which is getting out, because I used to get out and do some walking. As a matter of fact, I went to one of those outside concerts and decided to walk to the destination, and it was a good 2 or 3 miles, a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler, but not exactly warm. I mean, cool either. And I did walk there and then walk to my destination, because I get around by mass transit, and I actually enjoyed that walk and need to do more of that, because I had gotten away from that. So I do know I put on a couple of pounds, but a lot of times people are excited about joining like the glamour gyms, so whether that's the ones that have those titles like Ric Flair and other things, but then some people are like not that excited about them, and they like going to the ones in their apartment complexes or in their homes and all along those lines. So I just wondered your take on the fitness industry in general, and particularly the fitness industry during and after the pandemic.
Yeah, so fear not, Mark, as you are part of the congregation of those who on average gained 29 pounds during the pandemic, because I think they said the average weight gain was like 29 pounds during the pandemic. I think that the state of the fitness industry is interesting. Look, the fitness industry can be manipulative like any other industry, like the business coaching industry, like the entertainment industry. Jeff could speak obviously more eloquently and in more detail probably about that than I can. It can be manipulative. Why? Because when people are faced with an issue that can be so deeply personal to them for very different reasons. As an example, I remember many years ago, probably some 17 years ago, I had in my office a woman who was single and overweight, and trying to better her health. And in our conversation, we were just going over what her life was like, what's contributing to her habits. And one of the things that she started doing was she just started blubbering. And what came from that was the fact that she just got a lot of pressure from her mother to marry and have children and, to be at a certain place in her life. And she wasn't happy with herself. And, so it can be deeply, people's fitness journeys can be deeply emotional, or they could be surface level, that it was just that they did not do much during COVID. Therefore, the trips that they did make, that they didn't make outside, were to the pantry and to DoorDash world in the app. And so from where I sit, I believe that the fitness industry is it serves a unique role right now, which is that fitness can be delivered more cheaply and more inexpensive than it ever has since it's been commercialized. I mean, you have $10 Planet Fitness gyms that cater to people who don't have a lot of money, but have the ability to access all the same equipment that you can get in a $300 to $500 a month Equinox or Lifetime Athletics club. That's a unique place to be, right? Because that's not where the industry was years ago. And then you have fitness professionals who could smell out someone that has some of these troubling issues and can get them to spend thousands of dollars on products, creams, potions, pills, and and training that they just don't need, right? And so I think it's really incumbent upon the most honest version of who it is that are in these industries to try their best to call it out when they see it. If you're part of it, you should call it out, right? The dishonesty and things like that.
No, I definitely agree with you on that, and I think you sometimes have to call it out even in the business coaching world, because I do know some people in the business coaching world, and sometimes they have these goals of things that they say that they want to accomplish, and then you're going like, you have this goal that you want to accomplish, but I haven't seen the result of the goal. So yeah, sometimes I have to even call out some of the business people as well, because they will say that, buy this book or buy this book or buy this or that, and there's not a return. Or even I've seen some people that have done some fundraising efforts where they claim that they are going to give this or that benefit, but then you don't see the actual return on the benefit. So then you're going like, well, you've been saying that for like 6 years and we haven't seen the results. So that's where I sometimes
have you noticed the cadence of the people, some of the business coaches you may have passed them on Instagram or Facebook. The cadence is very 1940s carnival fair potion elixir type of pitch. Give me 45 seconds and I can transform your business by 10, 15, 25, 30, or 50x in 30, 60, or 90 days. Always that's the formula. And it's just, if you follow these easy steps or the system I put into place, then it can transform like that, right? Turning around a business is like turning around a freight ship. It takes time for it to slow down to a stop, turn, and then go in the other direction. It often can't be done overnight that easily.
Or it hits a bridge. I just want to say, Mark, for breakfast this morning, I did have a fruit smoothie. And as soon as the pandemic shut us all down, I ordered a gym caliber elliptical so that I would have some piece of gym equipment at home during the pandemic. Micah, I wanted to say that if at your health club that you worked at, if most of the people encountered initially were rich white people, I wasn't there.
You certainly weren't walking in with the leather patches on your jacket.
No. And also, I am a huge Boston Red Sox fan, largely because as a former New Yorker, I detest the New York Yankees. So go Red Sox.
Go Red Sox. But along those same lines and everything, because I was just thinking about that and all along those lines, because even Vegas and all in that space, there are some stereotypes about Vegas that I also got shattered. Now, there was another stereotype that was proven to me, because I've only been to Vegas once, and it was actually to go meet a lady friend that I was involved with for a minute, and they lived there, and I think they still live there and everything. But when I got
how long was the minute, Mark? How long was the minute?
That was about maybe a few years and all along those lines. So it was a minute in that sense. It was during the pandemic and all along those lines. So it was an extended minute and all in that kind of way. But I was going to say, when I did get off the plane, the first thing that surprised me, I shouldn't have been surprised because it's Vegas, is that there was literally the slots waiting for you. Because as soon as you get off the plane, there are slot machines off of the airport. And I'm going like, wait a minute, y'all really want my money really bad because y'all have already got the slot machine here waiting for me to spend some money. And I don't think I might have spent a quarter, and I was like, that's my limit. I'm not going to spend any more and everything. But I know some people that get there and they spend totally in the airport. But the thing that surprised me about Vegas was, I guess I don't always think about the fact, even though that I know that there is a part of Vegas that was very minority oriented. There was even a very popular hotel that was black owned, and I can't think of the name of it. Might have been the Moulin Rouge or one of those like that and everything, but it was definitely black owned. But I did not realize that there was because I don't think about Vegas that way. You think about the Strip, but there is literally projects in Vegas as well. So I remember going to like Kwanzaa and seeing some of the projects that exist, and I'm going like, wait a minute, I was not expecting to run across the projects in Las Vegas and all along those lines, but it did exist. I should have known. I should have thought about it because I did work briefly at a newspaper in Boca Raton, and Boca Raton is like near West Palm Beach in the very ritzy area of Florida, and there was literally a project there as well. Ironically, or maybe not so ironically, it was right next to the police station. So I think they did that intentionally, put the project next to the police station.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing that I found about Vegas when I moved here, of course, I had been here about 100 times prior to that as a vacationer on the Strip as a gambler. I mean, that's all I ever saw. But you know, I came into, I mentioned 2018, which of course was less than a year after the most horrific mass shooting in the history of the country, the Mandalay Bay country music shooting. And that was the event that brought the whole city together. And it was regardless of race, color, anything. And it was also the same year that our first professional sports team began playing, which was our hockey team, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, and made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. And that unified the races, everything that was happening here. And as far as the projects, sure, there's poverty in every city. There's low-cost housing in every city. And when I moved here, I was told, well, you really should kind of be wary about North Las Vegas. That was in 2018. Now North Las Vegas is becoming one of the most thriving commercial areas of town. And the real estate prices have gone up. And I don't think it's because of gentrification. I think, remember, Las Vegas began as a city in the 1940s, 1930s, 1940s, kind of the beginning of the 1950s. And largely because, and was there racism at that time? Sure, definitely, but I think it was largely because of the black show business legends who were imported, who took a stand only 20 years after the city was established, that the city was one of the fastest cities to integrate, for that. I don't think, I sense that there's racism going on here. Certainly our Latino population is enormous, and a very strong political lobby in the city because of the culinary union, which is the single biggest union in the state. Even politically, it's taken all kinds of weird turns in the 6 years I've been here. It's for the last 20 years, it has voted Democratic in the presidential elections. I have voted Democrat my whole life. And it's not because I think Democrats are geniuses, especially now. I don't think the Democratic Party is. But, much in the same way that Bill Maher says, I will vote for Biden if his head were in a jar of blue water. I feel the same way. But we're now being called a swing state. It's up in the air as to whether, the state's going to vote Democrat. All I'm saying is that it is one of the most diverse, and I don't see the racism. I see health problems here. I see alcoholism here. I see drug addiction here. I think that's but it's everybody. It's not limited. And, just last year was the first time that Native Americans, I don't want to say took over, but became owners of one of the biggest casinos in town. Nothing is unavailable anymore. I live in a 250 unit condo community in one of the ritziest suburbs in town. And at least, I don't know a lot of my neighbors, unfortunately, yet. We're still emerging from that pandemic mentality. But I think that we have a very large percentage of African Americans living here. Maybe they're not the owners, maybe they're the renters, but nobody's isolating another group in Las Vegas right now. And living here has also taught me that this city and the state is much more, not economically, but is offering much more to as a state, be it culturally, be it educationally, be it industrially, in terms of, I know there are major, huge efforts going on in terms of clean energy initiatives that are going on here. And it snows here. Yeah. So these are the things that I have learned about. I'll tell you, the only thing that they don't have here are actors. I wish they did, but they don't have actors. The reason for that is because we have enormous art schools in town developing acting ability. But, we're a 4-hour drive from Los Angeles. And the the acting students who graduate from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, as soon as they receive their diploma, they jump into their cars and they drive to Los Angeles. So we lose them right away. But in terms of anything else, we've got Elon Musk opening his company's car factories here. And for all I know, there are top secret Elon Musk space station goings on here. And there are museums beyond the Strip. People think, you hear about the Mob Museum and the Neon Museum. No, those are just more tourist traps for gamblers. But there are actual museums here, but they're not on the Strip. These are some of the things that I learned about. And again, I think the linchpins were the original African-American star, big name entertainers who came here, who kind of broke down the color, helped. Only after 20 years of this city's existence, that's not much time. I mean, how long would it take a Boston? What did it take? 150, 200 years to really be an integrated city in the best sense of the word. I suppose our governors haven't been. I guess they've mostly been just old white guys so far. But and our mayor for the last 20 years at least, I guess, there are. I don't think there are barriers. I just don't think that's the way the populace voted. That's all.
It can change, because that's one of the things I know. Like I said, I know the history of Boston. I definitely know the history of North Carolina. But ironically, even though Durham particularly is talked about as one of the Black Wall Streets, and even some of when I do history talks, not so much on the podcast, but I will sometimes bring it up in the podcast. The Duke family that created Duke University, and all along those lines and everything, they were very much considered, even in that day, somewhat progressive whites. So therefore, and then there were even avowed racists like Julian Card, who was, I think, a member of the Klan, and who Carrboro, which is next to Chapel Hill, was named after. But they liked the idea of separate but equal, and would even sometimes fund the efforts within the Black Wall Street. So Duke actually gave money to some of the Black Wall Streets. As a matter of fact, at the Hayti Center, which is the place that I work at, or one of the places I work at, he's got a stained glass that is more prominent than the two of Jesus Christ himself and everything, because he's got the one at the top of the ceiling and all along those lines. So he's got the most prominent stained glass there. But he did give some money, so that's part of the reason at the time that they were building the church, and I think that was like in 1891 and everything. So there was an effort to try to, because I think both Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, which if you study African American history, they had totally opposite views. One wanted to be more of an assimilationist, and the other one was wanting to go the opposite direction. But both of them agreed that that was a town that had a different view of the way that the white society treated the Black society, and literally downtown. Part of Black Wall Street is in downtown, and it was in downtown at that time as well. So you can imagine that some of these elites of both races were there actually intermingling, and maybe not doing the kind of intermingling that they're doing now, but there was some intermingling, including some clandestine intermingling as well, because there's even some speculation that some of the elite in the African American community and some of the elite in the white community may actually be related. Now, whether they want to acknowledge that relation or not, that's up to those individual families and all in that space. But yeah, it's sometimes interesting because this is one of those more, well, it's always been a liberal and progressive town within North Carolina, and it's always had that history. It even has that history now, because we've had Leonardo, our current mayor. I think he's either the second or the third African American mayor, and we've also had some very progressive European mayors as well. So it's always been seen as even the outlier, because North Carolina is one of those things that you were talking about. It is a swing state as well, and I sometimes joke we're the only state that gave you both Terry Sanford and Jesse Helms. So we gave you both of those. And if you think about that, that is a very unique thing, that we gave you like the ultimate liberal in Terry Sanford and the ultimate conservative in Jesse Helms. So that'll tell you something about the state of North Carolina.
I'm very proud of the motion pictures. I know this might not be a popular opinion, but I'm very proud of the inclusion in this industry. I don't believe is a new thing. I don't believe Oscars were so white for so long. I did my own study, and before the Oscars So White initiative or hashtag got, really caught, really became popular, I went back and looked at the history of the Academy Award. Remember, first of all, the Academy Award is the highest honor the film industry bestows. They can only nominate what is made. Right. So the fact that a relatively small percentage of people of color or women were nominated or won Oscars before Oscars So White became a thing, it's not the Academy's fault. They can only nominate people and films that are made. And I went back and looked. There were over 120 people of color who had been nominated for or won awards before that whole thing started. Now, if you add up all the nominees and movies that were nominated over the first 80 or so years of the Academy, 75 or 80 years of the Academy, yeah, it represents a small percentage. But how many other industries over that period of time have bestowed their greatest honor on so many people of color and different gender? My new movie, to plug myself again, Goldilocks and the Two Bears, I cast the right for the roles in the roles. I crewed the right people. Crewed people I'd worked with before that I knew were just creative geniuses. But I didn't care whether they were gay or straight, what color they were, what their sexual preferences were. And it turned out that there were 23 men, 23 women, and one transgender individual who worked on my movie. It turned out that two of the principal people working on my movie were gay. I didn't even know it until after we shot the movie. There were, my production sound mixer, who had worked on an Oscar-winning film before mine, and who did genius work for me. Yeah, he was African American. I didn't hire him because of that. I hired him, to be truthful, because I'd worked with him on one of my other films, and he was a genius. The film he had won, the film that won an Oscar, he had done the sound on, was that 7.5-hour ESPN documentary, OJ Made in America. And just great people. If you see my film, you'll see there are only how many? 3 African American actors in the film, and that's because it's obvious they're Black actors. But they weren't hired because they were Black. They were hired because they were talented, and that's why I distributed. I distributed Robert Townsend's first movie. Had my boss let me, I would have had distributed She's Gotta Have It. It was.
So you distributed Hollywood Shuffle?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with Hollywood Shuffle.
Wow.
And Robert was great to work with. I mean, he's one of the most wonderful people I'd ever. To me, I grew up, and my first boss was Black. And this was in 1971. So, I'd like to think that my industry, and I'd like to think that I'm colorblind. I'll tell you what, though, I don't think I could write lead characters authentically, African-American lead characters, because that's not what I grew up around. And I think culturally, I'd be a failure at doing that. So is it a failure of mine? I guess you could call it that. But I think I wouldn't want to undercut the truth of characters I write just because I am culturally remiss at having, real depth into that part of the culture.
No, that makes sense. I got a question for both of you, and this is actually a business-related question. We got about another 20 or 30 minutes ago in the whole show and everything, but it's a business-related question because one of the things that I regret in terms of North Carolina, there was a time that North Carolina was either rated third or fourth in the filmmaking industry. It was actually behind New York and California. And then later on, Georgia came on with Tyler Perry and a number of other folks. I think Louisiana is down there now. So we might be as far down as sixth or seventh. But at the time we were third and fourth, we also gave a lot of successful tax breaks to filmmakers and all along those lines. And at some point, one of our leaders, and I think it might have even been the legislatures, decided to get rid of those tax breaks. So then we don't see as many films as we used to in North Carolina. So I think that was one of the mistakes politically that was made by my state. And I definitely am proud of my state in a lot of ways, but I think that was a costly mistake. I mean, there have been some things like I'm trying to think of the film that Colin Firth was in, Main Street, I think it was called, or something like that. But there have been a couple of things, including some TV shows that are still shot here, but it is not nearly what it used to be. And part of that is because you've got states that have done better in terms of giving tax breaks and making it appealing to come to their individual area. So I was just wondering y'all's take on that from a business standpoint and also from a filmmaking standpoint. Because like I said,
Yeah, I mean, geographically, North Carolina, having abandoned that tax credit option, is really behind the eight ball now, because geographically, how do you compete with Georgia, which has one of the most generous tax breaks for film and television? And then, of course, you've got this billionaire, monolithic Tyler Perry, who practically owns the state now. But New Mexico is the same way, and New York has a phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to catch up now. California's is terrible, ironically. Nevada, it's also terrible, and that's why I hope to make my next movie back in New York. I'm not going to move back to New York, but I'm going to make my next movie there. It has benefited me twice in the past. The tax credit situation, and my movies are not very expensive, and that's one of the ways we were able to make them. So.
Yeah, there's a term, Hollywood East, and the Hollywood East refers to, well, primarily Massachusetts and Connecticut, but New England area has, since I believe, and Jeff may know this more so than I, something like since the early 1900s has been a staple in the film industry. And there have been at least 4 or 5 Oscar winning films that were made in Boston or the surrounding area, though Jaws and The Departed, and even what's the one with Robin Williams and Matt Damon, Good Will Hunting, I think. And yeah. And it's just, I think that there are so many opportunities that come with the film industry, the support staff, and the tax breaks brings a lot of jobs to the area temporarily. Denzel Washington, of course, basically filmed half of all of the first 2 of the Equalizer films in Boston as well, or at least maybe a quarter of those films in Boston as well. I mean, there's been so many recently, an uptick in films that have been created here in Boston, and for good reason. It has a unique architecture, unlike other cities around the world, obviously, and in the U.S. It's obviously one of the first constructed cities in the entire United States. So you have a bit of preserved old architecture that kind of films well, I believe, and aesthetically looks good. And it lends a unique flair, not to mention, of course, the Boston accents, which are both ridiculous and sophisticated at the same time, and it kind of gives a nice, I think a well-rounded approach to these films. But, I think the question for us locally is, do the tax credits and the jobs that are brought, if we're going down to a nuts and bolts level, economically, what does the state, actually profit? How does the state and the people profit from having the film industry locally, right? I think artistically it profits. I think that you find undiscovered talent that way. I think that you are able to open up support roles for people who otherwise would not be able to find them unless they move to a place like Los Angeles and work for, Sony Television, or Universal Films, whatever the case is. So I think that the question is still open in terms of the economic cost to benefit ratio of the film industry. I think it's easy to say that all tax credits are good credits. Obviously, I mean, that's a debate that economists have all the time. I know locally I know that it creates tourism, which is another benefit. But that usually comes post films because people want to see what it's all about, right? Much like the Breaking Bad TV series turning New Mexico into a tourist trap to some degrees. But I think that there is some unique benefit to even if it, I don't want to say costs us money, but even if it's not a one-to-one benefit for the state, artistically having films made in your area, I believe, is important for the humanities. It's important for culturally for these films to be made in different areas and to be on location, like in an American city like Boston. Again, it's a unique city that should be showcased in film. And so I think that economists look at more than just dollars and cents and trade-offs, right? They also look at what are some of the more esoteric benefits to like something like to a film being made in the area. How else do they affect the people who are indirectly involved with the film? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I apologize, Micah. I think the whole yay or nay question about film tax credits state by state is really not just, well, will this film at a budget of $500,000 or $50 million, will it benefit, will it be more of a plus than a minus in terms of what we're going to give them back? I don't think that's as big an issue. You mentioned Breaking Bad, but in New Mexico, between Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, which is basically the same series, we're talking about those two alone created permanent jobs in New Mexico. So it's Tyler Perry's studio has created permanent jobs in Georgia. So I directed my third film in Connecticut, but we all went home to New York at the end of the shoot. So there was not anything permanent about it. We had very few people in or working on the movie who actually lived in Connecticut. So a bunch of hotels made money on our production, but they didn't contribute permanent employment for that film. The fourth film I distributed in 1977, some of it was shot in Boston, but there were no tax credits back then. So
do you remember? Do you remember Plymouth Rock Studios that was supposed to be built in Massachusetts? So 2008, there was a film studio called Plymouth Rock Studios that was supposed to be built Plymouth, which is on the way down to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, about halfway between the Cape and the islands and mainland Massachusetts. And they tried to raise funding to build a film studio here because filming in Boston was picking up, right? And it has picked up, and it's obvious because you can see there's actually a percentage of movies that are filmed now in the last 10 years that were filmed here, right? So so it's obvious that people want to film here, but the funding failed for that studio, and they haven't been able to resurrect the funding. And of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that funding for a Hollywood studio is immense.
And that could be an interesting experiment, because there was a studio, I think, that a couple of people, including Dolly Parton, because I want to say that it is still available now. But if you study history, you will know the De Laurentiis Studios, and eventually that was bought by Phaedra Blackwell, and he had a thing called Pinnacle Studios, and he was hoping to make a studio house out of what used to be the old B-movie De Laurentiis Studios and everything, but it was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally, it's in Caswell County, which is like 2 counties over from Durham. So you go through Durham, you go through Orange, and then you're in Caswell. So it's in the middle of nowhere. And even though there's a smaller colleges in that area, and they do some arts education, they don't do enough to kind of, like what y'all were saying, supply the demand. Because a lot of people, I knew some people even from Georgia, this might have been around the time that Tyler was starting his studio, but he was never, because he came from ironically, he didn't come from the film industry, so he was kind of like going into it because it was a passion project of his, not something that he knew a lot about and everything. Because I want to say that his family was in the funeral home business, and he thought that it would be great to have this studio. And I want to say that the Sound Lots are still there. They have a magazine that's affiliated with them that I think is still published, and the church or some churches may use it as a part of their congregation stuff. But I mean, it was literally in old plantation type environment, because you heard me talk about Stagville. So it was a former plantation site. So it had a lake house. It had a number of other things there that you would think would be appealing, but he was never able to get enough support from the surrounding area. And it's kind of like what you're saying with Plymouth. It never went anywhere, and it's one of his failed business projects. I mean, he did have some other successes, and I'm not even sure if Phaedra is still with us and everything. It's been a minute since I've been in touch with that family. But I did go to the studio because they were doing like a mixer, and this was way before the pandemic, like it was probably about 10 years ago. And it just looked beautiful out there. But like I said, it was in the middle of nowhere.
It was David Kirkpatrick. Excuse me one second, Jeff. It was David Kirkpatrick, former head at Paramount Pictures, was trying to pioneer like a $500 million, full motion studio, Hollywood studio here with like 14 sounds. It would have been a massive project, but the funding, of course, they couldn't get enough, reciprocal tax benefit for building it, and it fell short. But like there had been a plan back in 2008 to build this. It would have literally been a Hollywood East. It would have been a massive, except probably accepting tours. Like it was quite the plan, but it just didn't go through. Sorry, Jeff.
Well, no, that's okay. I mean, I love hearing these anecdotal stories about failure as much as I do about success. I mean, I mentioned earlier that my new film is the first film ever to be shot in its entirety in Las Vegas. But as we know, there have been probably 1,000 films, many of them very high profile, many of them successful, that have locationed in Vegas, mostly on the Strip. But then they pack them up and head back to Los Angeles to shoot the interiors on sound stages. I mean, when you watch the remake of Ocean's 11 with Brad Pitt and George Clooney and Julia Roberts, they're robbing the safe at the Bellagio. Well, they didn't film inside the safe at the Bellagio. That was all done at studios. Some was shot in California, some in Florida. And right now, and this has only been going on now for a year here, the state decided we need a movie studio. This is the only way we're going to get people to stay here and make movies. And right now we are building it's between $1.5 billion to $2 billion movie studio, ironically, just south of where I live. And they've plastered Mark Wahlberg's name. They've attached his name to it, I think only because he's the only quasi bona fide film celebrity who lives in town. But I think that his tacit involvement with the studio is how they were able to complete the funding. But, that's just one of the absurdly expensive projects that is successfully moving ahead here. I mean, I mentioned sports before. As we know, the Oakland A's are going to be playing in Las Vegas in a brand new baseball stadium in 2028. that is going to break ground at the beginning of next year. And that's ironic because, in my opinion, the best baseball movie ever made was about the Oakland A's, which was Moneyball. And then we've got our football team, and we just built this Allegiant Stadium here, and sold the naming rights to Allegiant Airlines. And like any major stadium in the country right now, we host an NFL team, and off season we have the Rolling Stones performing. So
we see that with the RPC, which is what the Hurricanes play at, which is our hockey team, because I think we came around the same time as the Las Vegas team, because they were formerly there in Connecticut, because they were the Hartford team, and then they moved down here several years ago, and they did win one Stanley Cup, and were considered contenders this year, but lost in like the second round and everything like that. But they did manage to win a Stanley Cup as the Hurricanes. I think that was several years back and everything. And like I said, RBC is also used as a performance venue when they're not doing the Hurricanes. And I think that maybe they even, I think the basketball team for North Carolina State, I think they play some of their games there as well. So there are a number of things that go on in that space. By the way, Jeff, you may get an argument from people in North Carolina because they may claim that the Bull Durham movie, as well as some of my women athlete friends, might go with The League of Our Own as being one of the greatest baseball movies.
I loved Bull Durham. It's a great movie. League of Their Own is okay, but I think Moneyball can't be topped. I will say it's kind of ironic or depressing or both that at the head of the top of the standings right now, the WNBA team that's number one plays at a casino in Connecticut. It's the Connecticut Suns play. They're at the top of the WNBA standings right now. So is it just too much all about gambling or what?
What do the locals feel about that sphere that they built?
Well,
I've been thinking about that, and
I've never seen it from the inside. I can't afford tickets to go inside.
That's insanely expensive.
They're showing a 1 hour long movie, and it costs $100 for a ticket. And the owner is not a Nevadan. The owner is James Dolan, who owns Madison Square Garden and the Knicks and the Rangers, and he's kind of part of what I think of as the evil empire. That said, when it opened and U2 was performing in their so-called residency, the national reviews of the venue were uniformly raves, from major magazines to regional newspapers. The only naysayer was the New York Times, but you kind of got the sense that there was something personal going on there. And maybe it had to do with James Dolan. I don't know.
Something personal in that sense, everything. But y'all are right, because even the DPAC, which is our performance venue and everything, and a lot of people come from Virginia and even some from South Carolina. I want to say even from Georgia, because they get a lot of off-Broadway shows and they get a lot of major shows to come. But I remember when it first opened, and that was several years back, there were a number of people that were fighting against it because they thought it was going to destroy our local entertainment community. But it has become one of the premier entertainment venues up and down the East Coast. It's usually ranked as one of the top one because they get all of these great shows. And like I said, some of them are off-Broadway shows, traveling Broadway shows, as well as a venue that a lot of the concert people can get if they're looking for not a mega super-sized venue, because I think that it holds like maybe about 2,000 or 3,000 people and everything, but they're looking for a nice sized venue. And even with those Broadway shows, it's for the whole week. So you're getting a week run. And so that's a pretty decent little clip, because their ticket prices they're not overly expensive, but they're not like cheap either. They're kind of like in that middle range and everything in that space. But I know that they've been hugely popular, but there was even a pushback, because even some of the existing arts organizations like the Carolina Theater, which is an art house, and the Arts Council, and a number of others were feeling that it was going to destroy them. But it kind of comes back to what y'all was saying about drawing people into a town, because they would come into the town, then they would go to the restaurants, they'd go to some of the other things, like they might make a night of it and even go to a ball game, because the Durham Bulls still play as a minor league team. They weren't just the movie, they also are an actual team, and they've actually had success, because I think that up until last year, they've won, I want to say 3 out of the last 5 international championship. So they have had some tremendous success, even though right now I think they're sitting in, because they do the 2 half things, and I think they're sitting in like the middle. So unless they win the second half, they won't be playing for the championship this year. But stranger things have happened depending on what the major league team does ahead of them in terms of bringing people up and down and all along those lines. So they may have some success. But I do remember, because I was part of that group that was like, no, we don't want them big megaplex and everything. And ironically, there's now, which I'm sure you've been hearing about, a push in the entertainment industry, because there's this lawsuit that's out there. Because I want to say that they are a Live Nation house. So there are some people that are feeling that certain entities own too much of the entertainment industry. So there's I think it's an antitrust suit that's going on, because they want to break up kind of the Live Nation house, because right now they own the artists, they own the venues, and they own the tickets as well, because they also own Ticketmaster. So I do know that there is a case in front of the courts.
I kind of agree with the Justice Department on that one. But when I was a kid and I wanted to go to see a big rock concert, I would sit on the sidewalk outside the box office in Madison Square Garden all night to get the best seats, and I got them at face value. So that's what it should be today. But I think that what we're all saying here is that between restaurants and film and concert venues, people do want to get out of their house.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one of the interesting things, and I think important things that is going on in the build industry, the construction industry, is that they are now building these work, live, play spaces around the country, where they'll have a nice, maybe mid-market rent price, but for that mid-market rent, you're also getting like a wellness block with a juice bar and like a fitness place, cycling, whatever. And you're getting something like a movie theater. You're getting, nice bars to go to, restaurants. And they're kind of just plopping these work, live, play spaces all over the place. I know that there's a massive initiative to do so in Plano, Texas, that they've just mapped out. I can't even remember how many square miles that they've mapped out for this, for like 1 million square foot office spaces with surrounding homes, both single and luxury apartment living, and they're just kind of plopping them in areas that were just once barren. And what's just transforming these areas where people can just go out and see a movie or see a live entertainment or see, just go out and with their family, have nice walk and exercise spaces and eat, and avoid the food deserts, because they're also close to existing neighborhoods that have been around for decades and generations. And, it's a very unique way to build. That it's been kind of going on for the last maybe like 15 years or so. But I think it's a unique way to kind of develop areas for local engagement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of people. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you, is that kind of an offshoot of tiny houses?
Yeah, so it's actually more of a modern city planning design focus. So they when I before I sold my company back in October, I had been contacted by developers from Texas, from Orange County, from all over the country, because they were building these work, live, play spaces. City planners will reach out to them and just say, hey, look, we would love to have a work, live, play space. We want to put both mixed use space, residential and commercial. We want to put health food stores and exercise places and bars and restaurants and all this other stuff. And so in an initiative to use massive vacant spaces in areas, especially this has been an initiative in Boston, but because there was a lot of open waterfront land that they've converted now into work, live, play spaces. But around the country, they're doing this. And it's a unique feature of city planning, because you can give it to one developer, you can give them all the tax credits in the world for the next 2 decades, and then they just build this city. And it just really just comes to life. It's actually happening now in Bentonville, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. If you just kind of research Bentonville, Arkansas, this is, they're trying to transform this area. I'm not sure if it's in the Ozarks. It may be close, but like they're just transforming it from the ground up, from nothing that was there to just this beautiful space.
Isn't that the home of Walmart? Isn't that the home of Walmart?
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yes, the home of Walmart.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Some unique stuff in that regard, even here in Durham, because I know in Durham for a number of years, and they're still doing it, because across from the ballpark is American Tobacco, and that was the old tobacco warehouses. And then one of the places I used to live in, I'm now in Duke Manor, but I used to live in West Village, and that was a former Liggett's place. So there has been this notion of converting the old warehouses into, like, not so much all of the kind of work living spaces, but into apartments. And that's been going on here for several decades. And that's something that's been going on for a while. But even to your industry, Jeff, I do know, and sometimes it can be a wonderful thing, but sometimes I wonder about it, because I don't know how viable it is and how much of a leg it can have and everything. But I do know that even before the pandemic, and this is going on now, a lot of the movie industry, because you were talking about the movie industry earlier, and everything was very much their numbers were down, so they started doing what I call event spaces. So there wasn't just a movie house, but it was a movie house complete with a restaurant, complete with everything else. So you were getting the whole kind of experience of both dining in at the restaurant and also watching the movie. So they were like combined facilities. And I know that there was a couple of those that have opened here in Durham. I know that they were very popular, this notion of you don't just see the movie. And part of that was also the glasses and the surround sound and everything else. But it seemed like it was more about the experience and not just whatever was in front of the screen, because you were also getting the restaurant and other things to be tied into it. But I don't know if Mike has got some thoughts about that, because that seems like be a business model that existed for a few years. And even what your thoughts as a movie maker were, because on one hand it seems wonderful, but then the meal might be a little bit more expensive because you're getting all of those little perks and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that life does get expensive, especially when you're having chai tea with some sort of nicely dressed caffeinated cup, beverage, whatever the case is, in a nice cozy cafe. You have to pay for that sort of mental serenity, I guess, these days. But look, I think that as consumers start to get used to a certain level of luxury in life, certain kind of defined luxury. The unique part of having or building out or having like these kind of featured spaces or niche spaces in more and more areas is that the volume tends to make the affordability of life experiences come down, right? And we can name a million areas of life where years ago they were so expensive to enjoy, but now because of consumerism, consumerism has produced producers, and producers have just started to create things and increase the supply of everything across the board. And as a result of that, the cost to engage in things, except for a show on Broadway, has come down. I
don't think that's coming down anytime soon, but yeah, you're right. Because I was just even thinking about how sometimes there are these unique spaces that are created because of the uniqueness of who created them. Because I know that not that far, because it's on the other side, so I can't remember if it's in Wake County or not, but there's a town called Holly Springs. And if you follow the Olympics, I know that the Paris Olympics are getting ready to take place. There have been a number of things that are getting ready to go on. Like this year, we're going to have breakdancing as a sport, but BMX wasn't always that big. The kind of like sports, stunt bicycling and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the stars, Daniel Dayer, is from here. So he literally has created what amounts to a BMX type center in one of those middle of nowhere kind of venues. But unlike the Yanceyville one, I think that because he's got that Olympic name, he's gotten people that are coming in, he's offering classes, he's teaching, and a lot of the young people are wanting to go there and see if they can outstunt the person that is the legend in that sport and everything. So like I said, so far his seems to be working, unlike, and I'm not saying it's going to be that way forever, but it does seem like when I've looked online, they have a good track record because of people that are being drawn in. And even here in Durham, we have a sports commission, and I'm sure that one of the things that they're going to start trying to draw on, because we just got a international champion. I didn't even know we had a champion. I knew we had the championship Bulls team, but apparently we've got an international championship soccer team, which I did know about, but also a championship Ultimate Frisbee. I'm going like, who even knew Ultimate Frisbee was a thing? But apparently we've got a championship team here in North Carolina that plays at our county stadium. I'm going like, well, that's going to be something they're going to be able to play off on. Shucks, they'll probably have something with our bull. The bulls is kind of our symbol. So they'll probably have Frisbees that they're selling with the bull stuck on it as a form of marketing to come to your point, Mike, because I'm sure they've probably got folks going like, hey, let's put a bull on that Frisbee and give it to folks so they can make some additional money, since that's kind of our one of our logos and everything.
We live in such a unique time. I mean, musical artists can control the distribution, and they can distribute so easily now. They are building these wonderful home recording studios that can produce the highest quality soundtracks. I mean, I can only imagine, Jeff, in the future of film and television as it continues to develop, that the cost in some respects to produce independent films are nowhere, if you would adjust for inflation and time, you can produce them at a more affordable clip than you probably previously could, including with maybe hiring editors and things like that, the ability to create a film. But I think that, we live in such a unique time where if you understand distribution, and not just distribution like for film or television only, but the distribution of brand nowadays, that is transformative. If you have something that's unique, it would be interesting to hear Jeff's take on like the state of the future of distribution, given that the amount of resources available to you are unique to any other point in history, and or does that even apply to your industry?
Because you're going to follow up on that to what Mike is saying, because that's one of the things I was going to ask you is, you are correct that filmmaking is probably the most expensive form of the arts. And I do have friends that are in the music business, but it does seem like with the advent of YouTube and with the advent of some of these social media superstars, I mean, the Beast is from here in Mr. Beast, I think is what he goes by and everything, but he's here in Durham and I mean, in the Raleigh area, but it's so easy to create content. I'm not saying that it's all great content, but it's so easy to create content. So do you think that will drive the prices down? Because one of the things that you said when you first came on is that filmmaking is one of the most expensive art forms. And I do agree with you in terms of currently, but will it drive the prices down so the average Joe can just make a film and also distribute it much easier than it was historically?
Well, I think that it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the kinds of again, character-driven dramas that I write and direct, I can now start and finish cast and crew any one of my films for approximately 30 or 40% of what it cost to make each of my first two films. And then, so it's gone down considerably, the production cost. But when I said it's a double-edged sword, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's enabled me to make a better living because my budgets have come down. Part of the way my budgets come down is for me to cut my salary, because I can't take the kind of salary that some filmmakers get when I'm trying to do everything else qualitatively, but on the cheap. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to still maintain, a reasonable lifestyle, with what little I do take out. People that enter our business, their dreams tend to be wanting to graduate to helm the Marvel type movies. And the cost of those is not going down, it's going up. Everybody thought CGI was going to reduce, digital was going to reduce the cost of making movies. In fact, those kinds of movies, the cost has doubled since the reliance on those kinds of that kind of computer imagery. Film distribution, I think, is more daunting than ever before because there are fewer players in the exhibition world. There's been a lot of merging and acquisitions and bankruptcies. You talk about the dinner and a movie one of the largest, if not the largest, such chain of movie theaters declared bankruptcy a few months ago and only was able to come out of it when Sony bought the company, and that was Draft House Theaters, which was just purchased a couple of weeks ago by Sony. So there are pros and cons. I mean, if I wanted to, I want to make my next film, I said, in New York, but 70% is going to be filmed in New York. The other 30% is going to be filmed in Ireland and France if I get lucky. And that means that my budgets go from $200,000 to $2 million. So, but it's the same character-driven, quality-driven, hopefully, film that Goldilocks and the Two Bears is. It's. I don't think it's. I think it's a great question. I don't think there are any easy answers. I am a glass half full kind of guy. I think I think movie theaters are going to be around forever. Yeah, sure. You know, we once pre-pandemic there was something like 20,000 or 31,000 screens in the United States. That number will invariably have to be crunched down a little bit in order to be profitable. But I think movie-going is going to be here forever. I don't think streaming is the answer. In fact, the major movie studios have openly said now that they need theatrical to drive their downstream profits. So streaming is just going to be another revenue. Yeah, the exception is Netflix. 100% of their business is streaming, as opposed to Apple, which streaming for Apple probably represents 1% of their business.
Right.
And the same thing is true of Amazon. So the outlier is Netflix. And don't misunderstand me. If Netflix offers me money to make my next movie, I will take it in a heartbeat.
If Netflix wants to call you, or even Apple wants to call you, you're going to grab it.
Yeah, I will be proud to be a Netflix, one of the direct on the roster of Netflix filmmakers.
That for me, like I kind of relate to that because I prefer to see movies in the theater. To me, it's magic, right? Seeing it on the big screen, the popcorn, the environment. Yeah, to me, it's the experience. I'm a movie buff, right? I love movies. I always have. I imagine I always will until my last day. And I just enjoyed the totality of the experience. And while streaming is convenient, you do lose part of the experience to the convenience. I think with most things that have become more modernized, but I completely agree that if there is a percentage of the population, if 5% of the U.S. population is like me and enjoys the experience of going out to the movies, they're not going anywhere.
But it's not just the movies. It's not just the movies, though, because I've got, like I said, HATAC is a performance venue. Well, I am glad to be able to pull clips and to sometimes even show friends or look at things that are going on if I'm not able to be there myself, working the event and everything. I also know that while I get it, and I mentioned it earlier with people's comorbidities, that's the word I was looking for earlier, and some of the other things that are going on that you can't always be at the movie house or at the venue, no matter what the venue is. So sometimes having that streaming capability is wonderful, but at the same time, I, like you, enjoy being there in person because it doesn't have the same impact hearing like even Kirk Franklin or I'm a big blues fan, Buddy Guy online as opposed to seeing them in person. But if you can't be there in person, like if he's playing in Switzerland, so I don't know that I don't have the resources to jump on a plane to be in Switzerland, so it's good to be able to see him in that regards and all along those lines. So I get it where it can come in beneficial. And I've even seen some venues that are, and it's to your phrase, Jeff, it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you want to make it available for people to see on the streaming platform, but at the same time, if you're making it too available, because what I think some people need to do is maybe show it later after the fact. But if you're showing it at the same time as the event is going on, then you stop some of the people from coming to the concert. Because I hate to say it, but we as humans can sometimes be lazy, and sometimes you get there and you're like, I'm going to go to the venue, and then you're like, well, I'll just go turn them on TV and I'll watch it on the screen, because sometimes we can be overly lazy, but I wish we weren't and everything. So I do. That's the double-edged sword that exists when you're doing simulcast. Because I know that even during the pandemic, some of the festivals that I was part of, they were forced to show the events through virtual kind of environments because they didn't want people to come into their venue. But now that we're more out in the public, but you still got people that are trying to do both, show it both virtually and show it at the same time as the live thing. And I think that can sometimes create a conflict on a business model and everything. But I don't know who y'all's thoughts, because y'all work in the industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's puzzling to me. I'd love to ask you two guys, just as an unscientific experiment. During the latter stages of the pandemic, I think somebody I think is a terrific filmmaker, a terrific movie maker, Steven Soderbergh. He made a movie, a low-budget movie, not relative to my movies, but low budget for his movies. During the pandemic, it starred Zoe Kravitz, and it premiered on streaming. It premiered on Max and has never been shown in movie theaters. I think it's one of the best movies I have seen in years. And nobody in my peer group has seen it, even though it's been available for quote unquote free for whatever their streaming subscription cost is every month for the last 2 years now. Did you guys see this movie called Kimmy?
Nope.
No.
One of the biggest filmmakers of the last 20 years. Zoe Kravitz has a name. She's somewhat of a star. It's a thriller. It's 90 minutes. You're on the edge of your seat. It's smart. It is actually a pandemic thriller. This is also the filmmaker, by the way, who made Outbreak, which was a visionary film because it kind of saw the coming pandemic. Nobody I know has seen it, and that's available for free. So streaming is not an answer for anything. Had that film been properly positioned for theatrical release, it would have gotten much more media support, much broader coverage, and you two guys might have seen it. I've watched it 3 times.
Yeah, I definitely did not see it. And as you said that, I'm going to have to go see if I can't find it and watch it, because I actually have done some judging of a horror and fantasy type films, and I'm surprised that it didn't come through that channel, but I don't remember it coming even as a submission, but I could be wrong, but I got to go back and look. Now, the flip side of what you're saying, Jeff, is that I can say that there have been times, including old reruns of shows that I like, and as you all know, sometimes if you're up late and you're watching TV, sometimes Mr. Sandman will get to you before you've seen the end. So I will say that there have been times that I have gone back to the free streaming to find like the old Criminal Minds episode. It might have been one that I'd already seen a couple of times, but I forgot the ending. So I will sometimes grab it off of those free services, because I'm going like, I don't remember what happened, so I want to see what happened. So, and Sandman got to me before I got to the end. So I will sometimes go back to find those episodes. And I'm sure you've done the same, Micah.
Oh, I will
Yeah,
watch movies.
for sure.
Yeah, no, I will watch movies again and again on television, because streaming is television. They show Seinfeld reruns there. It's television. It's streaming. And I watch it again and again. If I had seen it in a movie theater first and loved it, I'll want to watch it again. Then that's when I'll watch it at home, or throw in my Blu-ray, or, we used to watch old movies on free television.
Right.
Now we're paying for old movies on television, but
I mean, look, the Netflix business model, much like Tesla to electric cars, is so far ahead of other streaming platforms. It's not even close. I mean, I know that there are, Disney Plus that they've gotten walloped in the streaming world by Netflix. I think one of the biggest mistakes they made was pulling their catalog back to their own personal platform. Not sure it helped. There also seems to be a glut of creativity in Hollywood to a certain degree when it comes to new movies, what to make. A lot of remakes being done, which normally is okay, but the quality of the remakes is not even half of the quality of the original. And what we're seeing now is people just completely turned off. There's some kind of disconnect between, I believe, writers and this current people who are film goers in certain markets, segments, and certain demographics, and it's become quite fractious. I can speak specifically to the Disney because the model they continue to lose film after film after film. And granted, they probably are down the road and they've obviously committed billions of dollars to their slate, and they're trying to clean some of that up. But as an industry, you would like to see this in the 60s and 70s. There was like a boom of creativity with character driven. I mean, Jeff was talking about character driven plots and stories and films. 60s and 70s, and even maybe before that, there was a boom in character development, creation of these characters that spanned across multiple films and just in general throughout a film. The arc of the character went up. There was quality conversations, and what you don't see now is you don't see much character development. And I'm not sure if it's because they're falling into the technology trap with movies, which is that they're so relying on almost like auto-tune with R&B singers. Are they relying on technology to pull up the acting, or are they relying on, or is there just a glut of I don't know how to write for this modern day audience? It's a very interesting conundrum that I just observed, and I wonder.
No, God, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, it seems to be so. I'm not sure if you heard what I said earlier, but like I was talking about some of the common mistakes that business owners make, and I call them stupid mistakes.
No, I listened to all of it.
Yeah, the stupid mistakes is the acronym, but one of the things I talked about was the I, which is ignoring feedback. There just appears to be this filmmakers ignoring feedback, and to some degree ignoring what they call fan service in the industry for sake of, well, let me just write what I think the audience wants to see, as opposed to, there being an element of fan service, as a part of a show or feedback. And I think that is just, I feel like people used to make films and television because there was a connection with the audience.
I guess you're not going to rush and go see the latest version of Bad Boys with Will Smith and who's the other actor, but you know what I'm talking about.
I'm going tonight, actually. So
you're fueling your condemnation. I mean,
yes, just a bit, but there's some fan service to these characters too. They're and I'm fine with fans. I think there's a place for it, right? I mean, but
what's funny is that I think the greatest Hollywood sequel of all time might have been The Godfather 2, but that introduced a whole bunch of new characters too, and a whole bunch. It was the same, but it was completely different too.
Right.
So,
and as a business model, you can do that, and if you develop those characters, then you can create spin-offs and you can create other worlds. And you can tell the story differently. I think about Better Call Saul versus Breaking Bad, and Better Call Saul was just as popular.
That was a miracle that it worked.
It really is, and I understand that character wasn't necessarily, it wasn't planned to be in as big as it was, and look what it turned into, this whole Breaking Bad world. But I just noticed that, okay, who's the next superhero? Right, you think about Superman, or you think about Black Panther, you think about Iron Man, you think about the Avengers series. Who is the next superhero that was just created in 2024?
Right, because they don't want the next one. They want to figure out how to resurrect Iron Man. He's dead, but they want to figure out how to resurrect him. And I'll tell you, on a slightly older level than that, why did they kill off James Bond in the last movie if they plan to make more James Bond movies?
Yeah, that's a good question. But the opposite side of that is, and I'm not saying because I've been watching more reruns than anything else, and there's some great reruns even in the crime dramas. Like, I'm a big fan of NCIS and Criminal Minds, which I referenced earlier, and a couple of other ones as well. But when I was younger, I will not lie, I used to watch Love Boat, and I used to watch Fantasy Island, and I used to watch even Laverne and Shirley, but I don't know that I need a 2024 version of those shows. And that's what we're getting now. We've got like a new Love Boat that's coming out. I think there's a new Fantasy Island, and I think that I've even heard that there might be a new Laverne and Shirley. And I know there's the new, because it's a different type, because I've seen it advertised a newer version of The Odd Couple, because it's not even like Felix and Oscar, because I think in this case it might even be a man and a woman, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I know that I've seen an advertisement, but it's still that same notion of one person being the Felix, the super neat person, and the other being the Oscar, the super messy person, because there's this whole notion. I'm going like, well, I remember those shows in the 70s. I don't know that I need them, and if they come back with Welcome Back Carter, I'm really going to be through with them and everything. I'm like, we don't need big things.
Hey, I'm a big fan of Frasier. You know, like I'm
Yes.
a massive Frasier fan. It was so well written and so well acted, and the cast was just.
That's but you didn't like it because it was Boston. All right, wasn't
It was. Well, Frasier was in Cheers, right, which is in Boston, right? Absolutely. But Frasier took place in Seattle. But the quality of the writing. I mean, just the quality of the writing. You know, David Hyde Pierce, John Mahoney. It was Jane Lee.
Driven, right? Yes,
Character
exactly.
driven.
But
To your
a lot
point.
of what you're talking about is Hollywood chasing profits, and they're not. They're chasing losses, is what they're doing. And I think that people think there aren't original movies being made, or more importantly, original movies profiting. You can go back. I know it's pre-pandemic to all the way back to 2019. When now it's a Korean film, it's not an American film, but when Parasite came out, incredible characters, incredible writing, and it grossed domestically over $50 million, worldwide something like $200 million, and there was a huge audience for something like that, and it was. But Hollywood wants to put all their eggs in one basket. It was, I think, Cord Jefferson, the director of American Fiction. I don't know if you saw his Oscar speech this year when he won the Oscar for a screenplay. You saw American Fiction.
Right.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
you should see it. But when he won, he came up on stage and he said, instead of Hollywood making one $200 million movie, how about trying to make $10, $20 million movies? And you'll unearth all of this talent. You'll unearth all of this originality. And you won't be taking the same kind of risk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
wasn't that the case with like My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Wasn't it like a $2 million budget film that turned into some like a wildfire of a?
It was $200 million. Now I happen to think it was a terrible movie, but your point is well taken.
But isn't that part of the problem? Because you mentioned Black Panther earlier, and I kind of coming back to what Jeff is saying is that too often, if something becomes successful, then they want to recreate it, because isn't that kind of what they did with the one with the underwater character and everything? So it's kind of like they want to reinvent the characters versus kind of coming up with this originality. Because you have success. I mean, that's, even though I am a fan of Bruce Willis, definitely was a fan of his co-star and all along with those lines, but I don't know that I need to see Die Hard 75 or Die Hard whatever number we got to and everything, because definitely it just kind of got to the point where you're going like, okay, we have milked this cow a little bit too much. I'm a fan of science fiction. I like Star Trek and Star Wars, and I know some people are fans of one versus the others, but I do like both of them. But I don't know that I need to see Deep Space 19 or whatever they want to call it and everything. So it does seem that sometimes it gets a little bit the success is so good that they're like, well, we're just going to reinvent what has already made us money and everything, and versus trying to find some of the more original ideas.
Yeah, from a business perspective, the mistake that I think that Disney made was going too ideological too fast. They kind of outpaced, I think, maybe the market for what. Look, it's fine for people to be ideological. Everybody is to a certain degree, whatever the ideology is. But I think they kind of are outpacing perhaps their consumers, and rightly or wrongly, their consumers are kind of telling them that they kind of are looking for a different kind of Disney film, and it's just not being made, and it just keeps tanking their their product. They're turning these digital products into something that continues to be rejected by the audience. The numbers show it over and over and over again. And to the extent that Bob Iger had to come back to Disney and take over the reins. And then there was a board fight seat not too long ago. And there and I don't think it's over. And then you have obviously the other stuff and with the fight with DeSantis down in Florida, but like the point is that to some degrees when your customers are asking you to make customers want Disney to be creative. Mm-hmm. What I'm noticing though is that Disney is putting different things in the driver's seat to their product, and I think that there's an effective way to create a movie that endears your audience and keeps them close to the heart, and to give them the creativity and the original storylines that they liked, and to build these characters over time. And people will come back. And, history has shown that people will come back for part 2 and part 3 if you make it original.
Maybe they're still suffering from scar tissue a little bit, since the last time they did exactly what you're suggesting they hired Harvey Weinstein. So
point taken, they did hire.
I'm not suggesting that they hire back Harvey Weinstein by any means.
They even worse. They bought his company, paid him a fortune, and gave him autonomy. Even worse.
Caused even more problems and all along those lines. Well, this has been a great conversation. One of the things I get everybody to do at the end, and hopefully I'll get both of you back on in the near future, because I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope y'all have enjoyed it as well. But on both of all these shows that I do, whether it's the Online Dinner Party or some of the other ones I do, I give my guests a chance to tell how they can be reached, how they can be contacted. And also one of the things that I'm very much about is positivity, and us, because we went through the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, spreading positive messages and positive love and thoughts. So if there's a message of positivity that you would like to give to Pod TV's global audience, I would love to hear from both of you. And I'll start with you, Micah, since you're the first one in the door, and close out with Jeff and everything. But if you want to tell folks things that we didn't get to in the conversation that you want to share, your message of positivity and how you can be contacted.
Sure. Message of positivity. I think now more than ever, it's okay to disagree, but when you disagree, leave people with their dignity. That's okay. It's okay to disagree. I think it's important to disagree. I think you come to a more well-rounded understanding of your own argument and that of the other person. You understand them better. I think that what the world is missing is fortitude and understanding at the same time. It's all right. You can be tough and understanding. Balancing justice with mercy. This is a unique thing that not everybody understands. I think that, for me, in terms of positivity, it's leaving people, the highest form of being kind to humans is educating them and showing them, teaching them one thing that you learned that might improve their life. In terms of how I can be reached, you can go to my website, micah-logan.com. It's micah-logan.com, or you can find me on Instagram at micah-logan1. Or you can even tune into my podcast, The Common Sense Show, like dollars and CENTS, thecommonsensePodcast.com. I do a live show on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. And then I do an interview typically on Thursday afternoon. So that's my plug.
I appreciate it. Definitely sounds great. Jeff, what about yourself? And then we'll go out with some of these PSAs. Speaking of PSAs, as we get out the door, if you want to tell folks how you can be reached and contacted, if you want to give any other plug that you haven't gotten, including about the movie Once Again and everything, and your message of positivity as well.
Well, I can't quite be as elegant as Micah was with my message of positivity, but it's sincere, which is just follow your passions and never let them die. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter what gender you are or identify as, passion should prevail in your life, always. GoldilocksandTheTwoBears.com is the film's website. There's a lot of video information there. There will be a list of theaters, whether it's in Durham or Boston, that will eventually be up there. And if you have access to one of the cities it's playing in, it would be great to see. I'm very, very very proud of the film, and even more proud of these extraordinarily talented actors who star in it. And yeah, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and it's easy to find me there.
Well, that sounds great. We're going to go out. And if y'all have any thoughts, I'll actually just maybe throw one other thing, because the first PSA I'm going to play is a gentleman. I think he was out of somewhere in the Southwest. It might have been Texas or one of the places in that general area. But he was honoring not just the teachers, but also those behind the scenes. And I think he's been doing it for a number of years. And I think about it might be Oklahoma, but it'll come up on the advertisement and everything. But he's been honoring the support staff as well as the teachers for a number of years. So that's something I know a lot of times during the pandemic, teachers got a lot of great respect because parents found out, and I'm not a parent, but I am, because I don't have any kids of my own, but I am a uncle, and I do know from my brother and some of my friends that have got kids that they did develop a greater respect for teachers because they saw what teachers had to go through. And I'm sure even you, Micah, as a parent, probably saw that as well, because I know a lot of people have started giving more respect to teachers, and I still don't think that they're paid nearly what they need to be paid. But then again, I don't think fast food workers are paid nearly as much as they should either, because we got to deal with this cost of living, and we got to find ways that they can actually get paid better and all along those lines. But that's just my 2 cents worth. So, Micah, before I hit this advertisement, you got any thoughts? And maybe Jeff has got some as well about teachers, and then we'll get out with these 2 or 3 PSAs. But I do know that you mentioned being a parent, and who knows, maybe you still got time to go see them swimming and all of those lines. But before you get to that, I do have to tease Jeff about something, because you said you were going to get a smoothie. I was going to tell you that earlier. I was going to get a smoothie too, because when I went to that restaurant, we actually ordered 2 smoothies, wound up getting a substitute drink because, like I said, the restaurant was closing. So you know what they ran out of first? The smoothie mix. So the waitress came back to us. I was like, "We're sorry, can't give you your." I wanted a mango. I think my friend wanted either a peach or some other type of drink, and she was like, "We don't have them. The smoothie mix has run out," because, like I said, the restaurant was closing, so that was the first thing to go out. So I did not get the smoothie that I was hoping to get. I did get some ice cream after I got home, so it was needed a cool refreshment of some sort or another. So I did get the ice cream, but the smoothie was not in the agenda because of them running out of that mix. But Micah, any thoughts before I play this PSA and we get out of the door about teachers in general?
Teachers are critically important. I think that the teachers who love students change the world. It's because of good teachers that kids grow up to want to pursue important aspects of life, become entrepreneurs, become filmmakers. They feel like they can do things that can change the world, and not every kid will do it, but some kids will. Well, there was a student in someone's class named Elon Musk, right? And someone inspired him to think about rockets and think about electric cars and think about the environment, whatever the case is. And because of teachers, they really do help students to understand. And observing my children go from little kids to now teenagers, you just kind of see how their understanding evolves with age and kind of what they believe and focus on. And teachers in my opinion play probably the most critical role in society, which is educating young minds. And it's hard to actually quantify the impact that good teachers make, because a good teacher can inspire a student who inspires a generation and their kids and society. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. So my encouragement to teachers are to always think about the student first, and think about how what you say and what you do can affect and shape the future of the child that you're speaking to, because you never know who that child will become. Jaylen Brown, who just won the championship, one of his teachers in high school said that he was going to be in jail when he graduated, when he left high school. That's who he or she, that was their plan for him. He ultimately obviously proved them wrong. He's worth probably $500 million right now, and he's a world champion that can never be taken away. But what you say to kids matter, and how you act to them matter, and so you should encourage them. So the good teachers are irreplaceable.
Yeah, agreed. Any thoughts, Jeff, before I play this spot and we get out the door?
Yeah. First of all, very quickly, I want to thank both you, Mark, and Micah for allowing me to share the stage with you this morning. No, I have felt for decades that good teachers are not just woefully underpaid. They should be, in my opinion, the second highest paid profession, or the good ones anyway, only after doctors who save lives. That's the pecking order. They should make way more than film distributors, I'll tell you that. And they don't. That's the sad thing. They don't. I have a nephew who's a teacher. He inspires me every day. I see the generosity of spirit he has, the patience he has, the goodness he has, and all of that comes from being a good teacher. All of that is why he is a good teacher. I had unfortunately, only one teacher in primary school who was an inspiration to me, and 55 years later, he is still a friend. And that's what happens with great teachers. They become your friends and your signposts, your North Stars for life.
I definitely agree with you. And on that note, we'll go out with this award that has been going on for a few years with the teachers and the support staff. But I thoroughly enjoyed both of you, and hopefully I'll get you back on another dinner party and all along those lines, because it's about time for real dinner as well. And who knows, maybe Mike has still got time to get to that swimming pool and hang out with his friends and relatives and all along those lines. So we'll see if he can still get there and get to the pool before they have closed and had all the fun. They'll probably be looking at him like, you said you only gonna be an hour. It was 2.5 hours ago.
I think that ship has sailed. I think I heard my wife just pull up, but that's okay.
Fair enough.
This was.
What were you saying?
No, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad. Better than the pool.
You enjoyed it. And definitely look for having both of you on in the near future. But yeah, this was fun.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
Are you looking for money-saving strategies for your business and personal finances? Are you tired of working hard every day with little or nothing to show for it? Contact Prosperity Financial Services, LLC right now for your free financial consultation. Call now to reserve yours today. 804-349-8600. 804-349-8600.